Daniel Faria Gallery is pleased to present And Still No Rain, a group exhibition with works by Joan Kim Atchim, Justin Chance, Elizabeth Jagger, Maya Ruth Lee, Sarah Noah Mark, and Anna Zoria, organized by Madeline Torrens and Melanie Shiner. And Still No Rain explores themes related to language and loss, all the losses inherent in the moving and shifting of words, but also the experience of loss itself as something that occurs outside of language, forcing us to look for new tools to make sense of it. A word is elegy to what it signifies. This line, borrowed from a Robert Hass poem, appears against the grainy footage of a pregnant belly in Anna Zoria's video Still and Moving. Filmed in the last weeks of Zoria's pregnancy and edited immediately following the birth of her daughter, Marianne, the work stitches together lines from 23 different poets into one continuous text, a compendium of words that the artist would want to leave behind for her. In those weeks, it hit me that Marianne was real, and that my own mortality was illuminated against her realness, writes Zoria. In the video, Zoria appears to be reciting the text to her belly, collapsing the temporal states of pregnancy and postpartum, anticipation and mourning. Sarah Noah Mark's Unknown Hours and Tohu Vabohu feature hand-carved markings on clay tablets that beg to be read, resembling ancient Talmudic texts. Tohu Vabohu is a Hebrew phrase from the creation story, meaning unformed and void. A translation that Mark points out does little to evoke the imagery it contains of continuous crawling waters across the Earth's surface in a time of chaos before order. Over the years, Mark has developed a personal language system using a limited alphabet of shapes, dictated by her tools. This subtractive process is inspired by other carved languages drawn by time, such as canyons hollowed by water or aerial views of excavations. What emerges is a visual language of absence, an attempt to give form to the formless. Maya Ruth Lee's Language of Grief similarly features asemic writing, a visual text that has no semantic content. However, unlike Mark's symbols of extraction, Lee's language of grief is one of protection. Abstract shapes based on sewing patterns for clothing are painted in India ink on canvas. Glyph-like, these forms suggest legibility, letters from a language we have yet to learn or have forgotten, evading interpretation as soon as they invite it. At the same time, they hint at bodies, and the barriers between bodies and the outside world, all the fabrics and bandages that cover, heal, blanket, and warm us. In Justin Chance's Cruelty, embroidered letters lay atop an abstract field of color made of felted, hand-dyed fibers. When you name a thing, is that not a form of cruelty, he asks. Much of Chance's work considers the power of language and how it is dispersed, passed down, or thrust upon groups of people. The structures of language are reflected in the structures of the quilts themselves, built up in a process combining different felting techniques. In some layers, the viewer can find recognizable objects, while others obscure those scenes. Held together by horizontal lines of stitching, they offer a visual unfolding not dissimilar to the act of reading. Language and all its failures, typos, mispronunciations, and neologisms play an important role in Joan Kim Atchim's practice as both writer and visual artist. The translucent surfaces of her drawings hold layered scenes rendered from memory, caught in a state of becoming. In As a Fool Receive Me, a microphone picks up the ambient noise from the gallery, which is looped back and mixed with a recording of her writing. Who is speaking and who is listening becomes confused, while the sounds of a pencil scratching on paper allude to an unseen text. A text piece, perhaps the one we hear being formed, titled In Praise of Cry Breaks, accompanies the installation. Elsewhere, Elizabeth Jagger's miniature screaming women silently cry out into their tiny individual abysses. They perform the act of proclaiming, alerting, and shrieking, but are ultimately disconnected from their surroundings, inaudible. The blown glass fish in Jagger's Fish Stand with Fish 8 reference lacrimatories, small vessels found in ancient Greek and Roman tombs that were said to hold the tears of mourners. Once filled, these tear catchers would be capped with a cork, starting a timer on the morning period that would end once the liquid had evaporated. Jaggers fish, inspired by Roman vases from the 2nd century BC, are gutted, hollowed, mouths agape. Unable to contain anything, they remind us that sometimes empty vessels make the most sound.